David Mitchell, who grew up here and has just written the book, We Hold These Truths. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
What are your thoughts on this day, on this historical day?
I have to say, I was just in the green room watching President Obama receive Donald Trump, and I got to tell you, we can have debates about whether the policy was good, Obamacare, whether it's affordable or not, a variety of other things. But this president preserved the dignity of the office. He kept us safe. And I think that going forward, this president's going to get a lot more credit for what he did to preserve the office. That'll take time. Right now, we're kind of in the moment. We're thinking about policy, what's going to happen next. But I was just struck by that. This new president has set a broad agenda, an aggressive agenda. I think that there are folks in the African-American community, black and brown folks, working class folks who are concerned about whether this president will unify. He's made big promises. I think a lot of my friends decided to fly out of here. They wanted to get out of there. They just could not come to terms with this president. I think we have to engage this president. He's made big promises. He says he's going to go into lower-income blighted areas and bring jobs and opportunity. Let's take him at his word. Let's engage him. I don't think we can spend the next 4 to 8 years possibly sitting back, twiddling our fingers, and hoping that things just don't go as bad as they could. Right?
Or hoping he fails so he doesn't get reelected because we all fail.
Right. So,
and you've worked in politics for a while. So what does engage the president mean? I mean, obviously we see the protests that are happening. Yeah. We see people with signs out in the streets now. We saw fires set last night, different parts of the city. When you say engage, what do you encourage people to do when you talk to folks?
Well, so I think the way to think about this, if you're a Democrat like I am, one of the things that we saw was that the Democratic Party has proven unwilling to engage the progressive element. And we saw that with folks going over to Bernie Sanders. I'm talking about young people who are concerned about the cost of education, talking about people in their 20s and 30s and 40s who are drowning in a sea of debt, people who, African Americans, Hispanics who are still looking for that elusive American dream. The Democratic Party, I think if it does its own autopsy like the Republicans did in 08, they'll find that they have a progressive party. And the presidency of Barack Obama, his popularity, I think, kind of hit some of these fractures within the party. Until they figure those out, they're going to have a tough time winning elections when a guy named Barack Obama is at the top of the ticket. So I think that we've got to do that first on the Democratic side. Engaging Donald Trump means holding him accountable. It means continuing to talk about the issues that are out there, not just sitting back and letting him have his way. The one thing I am optimistic about is that this president hates losing. And so we've got to figure out a way to align, us Democrats, align our interests in a way that makes sure that our interests are served and he also wins, right? I think he's going to find that the campaign trail is different from governing. You've got to make deals. You've got to give and take. And I think this president is not going to be as aggressive on some of the issues that he fought hard for in the campaign trail.
Well, also, I was reading a columnist who said one way to, if you're not happy with the way things turned out, instead of, yelling from the sidelines, go get a job within the government.
Absolutely.
Change it from within. Be one of the people inside to make sure that the systems work the way they're supposed to work, or work to the best that they can.
Yeah, I think people are really concerned about the divisiveness right now. I mean, I always, I'm a student of history. If you look back, this is really nothing in the grand scheme of things. Go back to the 1850s when we were kind of moving towards civil war. People were fighting battles about whether states should be slave or free. Go back to the 1790s. The Democratic Republicans fighting against the governing party and the Federalists. The Alien and Sedition Acts were passed, which made it illegal to say something negative about the government. This happened in this country. So if you kind of think about the broad context, what we're seeing now is normal. Our democracy is functioning, at a normal level.
But I can't help but think, though, we live in an age now of instant gratification. We know what history has told us, but now we live where you can tweet, Snapchat, Instagram, all this stuff happens now, and nobody wants, it seems, in a lot of cases, nobody wants to work the process or to take the time to get on the inside. We held a forum a couple of months back where we talked to millennials about.
I was there.
Right. And so, and I remember there was one young woman who was very passionate about her feelings, and someone turned to her and said, "Well, get into the government and work your way up," and she had no interest in it.
That's right.
So what do you say to people who don't want to?
Who want the stage? That want to do the work.
Nothing worth having comes easy. I mean, I tell my friends, kind of people who are flying out here, disengaging is exactly the right way to get them to keep ignoring you, right? Politicians are animals of a system, right? The squeaky wheel gets the grease. If you stop squeaking, you're not going to get the grease. People who are concerned about the lack of progress in certain areas under Barack Obama, I always say, the folks that really pressed him right? They got a lot done during this presidency. Think about 2 progressive appointments to the Supreme Court, gay marriage. That happened because they were relentless. That lobby was relentless in pushing this president until Joe Biden finally kind of forced the president's hand. You got to push. There's no substitute for hard work. There's no substitute for putting in the hard work. And so I tell people that are concerned about, the prospect that, certain folks may not do so well under this president, I say the absolute last thing you want to do is get out of Dodge. You got to stay engaged.
Yeah, well, the other thing is the engagement on social media, the fact that any dolt can say something and we become inflamed.
Right.
Do we need to turn down our own burners a little bit so that we don't feel the need to just weigh in constantly? And I feel like everyone is just constantly offended. They're offended by everything, both sides. Everyone's being offended constantly and has to weigh in. So I feel like it's keeping the fires burning that aren't giving us the right kind of heat.
Yeah, I know the president in his kind of his departure speech where he told Americans to show up. I think that was critical. He also referenced social media, and I'm gonna botch this a bit, but he essentially said, stop having these conversations online and go have a coffee with someone, right?
Face to face, not hidden.
That's right. It's easy to discount an argument when you're not next to them, where there's not a pulse that you can touch.
Right.
We got to get back to kind of the hand-to-hand combat in politics, which is the way it was done in the very beginning of our country. We're shielded by the virtual reality and not kind of engaging in a real reality face to face. This president, obviously has changed the way people run for office. I think, 140 words, right? That's how he goes. I don't know that we can stop that, right? They have to kind of go with that, but I think that behind the scenes, Democrats, Republicans, we can all continue to engage and have to, sometimes kind of push back against this kind of instant gratification, put it out there on social media, and then fight it out that way. That's not a sustainable path, I think, to progress.
Okay, hang on just a second. I want to ask you about your book. Here we have former House Speaker Newt Gingrich and his wife showing up at the Capitol. We just saw John Boehner, also the former House Speaker, coming in. So it looks like people are starting to get into position. We're going to start seeing more and more familiar former famous faces coming in.
We're about an hour away now from when the actual ceremony is supposed to get started, so that explains part of the reason you're seeing some of these bigger figures in politics over the last few years. A wider picture now of the platform there that's been all set up for this inauguration. Wendy mentioned your book. We hold these truths.
What's it about?
So in 2008, I was a third-year law student watching this guy, Barack Obama, run successfully for president. And a lot of my friends thought that this moment would usher in a period of post-racialism, almost immediately, that it would change politics. It would change the way people thought about the viability of African-American, minority, and women candidates. And I was a student of history. I was skeptical. Right? We'd have all these situations in history where we thought we'd reached this kind of pinnacle, only to find that we hadn't quite got there. Well, I worked on a U.S. Senate race in 2010 in North Carolina. For Ken Lewis, a Durham attorney there. And we wanted to test the thesis, right, which was at the time that this changes everything. And what we found in that 2010 election cycle, people stayed at home, which is a big mistake, Democrats. What we found was that the pushback to progress wasn't coming from the usual sources. We found progressives. We found African Americans who were kind of reverting back to the same old way of thinking about politics, which is, business as usual. Black, brown, females, they can't win important elected offices. And I think this speaks to the larger issue of the engagement of the progressive community. I began thinking about what this means in the larger context of America. And we have these tendencies towards what I call demonstration projects, which are commitments to commitments, right? But not to the underlying substantive thing that's required to bring about the change. And I argue that 2008 was a demonstration project. I argue that the Emancipation Proclamation was a demonstration project, going all the way back to the very beginning, the Declaration of Independence, which we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Well, there obviously were some inconsistencies with what was happening in the country. We've got to decide that we're going to move beyond demonstration project politics and actually do the hard work of transforming the Obama coalition into a sustainable progressive Democratic Party coalition. That takes hard work.
Right.
Yeah.
David Mitchell, we hold these truths. Thank you very much. We're going to head out to Chris Gordon, who is out on the mall, and let's see what the crowd is